what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
And here we go.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode number 33 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network alongside Kevin Bohannon. My name is Kyle Sutherland. We are over halfway through the season now, as last week, week 5, technically week 6 of the year if you count back to week 0. Kevin, we had some great games in high school football, some upsets, but man, what a weekend of football it was. You and I know, had all of our teams won. Of course, Arkansas got their first top 5 win over the same team that they last did it against. And for, I guess, was it 2000 in Fayetteville? Yeah. So big weekend in Fayetteville. Both of our pro teams won. Of course, my Cowboys pulled out a crazy one Sunday night, but man, this is why we love football, why we love sports, because all those top 25, especially top 10 teams that went down in college, it's going to be hard, not just, again, in the prep ranks, but just overall as a whole collectively. It's going to be tough to top what we just experienced.
And this is what we love about the game that, goes back to, when we were young. And I can go back and remember as a kid, what it was like on Friday nights and then getting up on Saturday mornings. At some point, I was playing on Saturday mornings, whether it be 5th, 6th, 7th grade or JV in 8th grade at Mableville Junior High. So we always knew, what we were going to look forward to on game day, and then, of course, on Sunday, and getting ready for the week again. So the game's changed so much, and we've seen that the upsets that we saw in the amount of offense that we saw on Friday night was just, it could be one for the record books. I know our friends over at Hooten's did they did a study on how many 40-point games the winner, scores in a game has just gone up. It's like a mountain range. It keeps just going up. So the overall points in the game has gone up just because the game is geared towards more offense. It's a trickle-down effect from NFL down to college, down to the high school ranks. So starting to see more and more, and you and I are starting to see, and we've talked about this, we're starting to see the haves and the have-nots more than anything else. We're starting to see that separation in every classification, every conference. People are answering questions, and some people are stepping up like Maumelle did on Friday night. That was a huge win for them as they were just kind of reeling backwards. So they, a lot of coaches picked up their first win too. Coach Patton at Whitehall and then Coach Reggie Swinton at Forest City picked up their first wins as head coaches at their new schools. So, yeah, a lot of good things to talk about and a lot of good things to look forward to in week 6.
Before we do get into those things, I want to remind you, if you are watching on YouTube and have not subscribed already, make sure and do that. Hit that bell button so you are notified when we release an episode. You can also subscribe on any of the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We are there. And let's go ahead and get into it without further ado. If I can get this right. So Class 7A, starting at the top as we always do. Pulaski Academy took down Little Rock Central 63-14. Conway big over North Little Rock 63-7. The Wampus Cats had 9 takeaways for their defense in that game, Kevin. 3 interceptions, including a pick 6. It's just I'm going to leave it at this. It's crazy.
Yeah, I heard they had 2 pick 6s.
Or it may have been 2. It may have been 2. That doesn't shock me.
First quarter, 49-0.
Yeah, 49-0. And it's crazy to see North Little Rock in this position. Of course, I don't put the blame on the coaches. I don't put the blame on the players. I put the blame on the much higher ups. And I'll leave it at that. It's unfortunate that it's gotten to this point. But Cabot 42-26 over Little Rock Southwest. Bentonville, they won their second game in a row, did the Tigers with a 35-14 win over Fort Smith Northside. Then Fayetteville 41-38 over Rogers. Kevin, if Coach Dick is not on or blood pressure pills or some sort of heart pill, they may need to get some at this point with all the crazy just finishes that they've had between the Texas High. I know that they had a really close one with Broken Arrow, Oklahoma as well. I believe that was also a comeback win. But Rogers, we talked about them, that they have probably not gotten the amount of attention that they should have more coming into this year. And a lot of that is because they had to replace so much. But Jeff Reagan, phenomenal athlete, has done a great job taking over for Dane Williams at quarterback. That's just one position that you can talk about. But of course, in the win over the Purple Dogs' win over the Mounties, Garrett Odom, the UNLV commit, with another big game, 21 of 26, 283 yards, 3 touchdowns. Christian Battles scored 2 touchdowns on the ground, and then Katavian Taylor, Jason Delamar, one of the state's most dynamic receiving duos, each had over 100 receiving yards and a score. So big win for the Purple Dogs. It's, the thing about it is, Kevin, they're still undefeated against in-state competition, and they're winning the close games. People are going to say, oh, well, they're the defending state champions, and they're having to have all these comeback victories. The fact is you look at the win-loss column, and they've got way more wins than they do losses at this point.
Yeah, and they've played a really tough schedule. Let's go ahead and throw that out there. Plus, they lost a lot from last year. The guys they're doing it with this year are fairly new. And, Katavian Taylor was a young guy on that state championship team. He was one of those that I looked at and said, okay, the future is yours, big boy. And, of course, Jason Delamar had a great year. But, with Battles, Odom in the backfield, I watched a lot of that game, and it was back and forth. The first half was just up and down the field, 28-20. It was 28-14 at one point with the Rogers leading. Next thing you know, it's 28-21. They Fayetteville scored on the Katavian Taylor, I think about 65, 70-yard screen pass, and he just took it to the house on the next play. So, but, yeah, Fayetteville just did what they needed to do. The back end, their defensive backs were flying around. Jeff Reagan had a night. He is the Rogers offense. They had over 500 yards. I think it was like 580, if I'm not mistaken, between passing and rushing. What they do is it's hard to defend because they'll line up in a empty set, 5 wide, and they may have an H-back or a sniffer, as call it, go in motion, and then they just roll him out, and it looks like kind of a run pass option, and he can float it out or anything. So it's hard to defend because it feels like somebody's always on the move. So they're going to be tough to defend. Before the season, we talked about, okay, how's the West going to break out? Is it going to be Fayetteville, Bentonville, and then maybe Rogers, Bentonville West, and everybody else? But now, the way Rogers played, they got a game with Bentonville coming up, and it's going to be, that winner of that game is going to get the 2 seed. The last 3 years, Fayetteville Rogers has come down to 1 possession each game. It's been Charlie Graves got the winning touchdown catch the last 2 years. The touchdown pass was a dime that Garrett Odom dropped in the back of the end zone of Charlie Graves. But I think Rogers is probably the second best team right now. Trevor Grant had a really good night for Bentonville. We got to give a shout out to our Springdale Red Dogs. 5 for the first time since 2005. They keep rolling. Big win over Bentonville West, who is now 0-5 on the year. And it doesn't get any easier this week. They have to play. I think, who do they got this week? They got, let's see here. They got Rogers this week. So, yeah, it's not getting any easier for Bentonville West. Bryant, it's not the fact they beat Little Rock Christian the way they did. It's the fact that they dominated. It was 35-0 at halftime. Running clock second half, and they got to go from there. Cabot at Southwest was a little bit closer than what we thought it would be, but Southwest got some athletes. But Keegan Vest did a really good job controlling their ground game, and then PA keeps rolling along. Get to look forward to the matchup that used to be a preseason game, a AAA benefit game the last couple of years. So PA and Bryant, let's go.
And that's where the 103.7 The Buzz game of the week will be. We'll be headed over to Bryant, to Hornet Stadium for this one. And it's really big, Kevin, because like you said, this was in some cases, a pretty close scrimmage over, especially the first half. Now, Let's call it what it is. It's not that this game wasn't taken seriously as a scrimmage. It was probably taken maybe a little bit more serious by PA than it was Bryant. But the fact is the Bruins did compete with them. And so that's one thing that a lot of people, and pretty much, I think it was 2020 to last year that they did. I went to at least the first half of all of those games, were a lot of fun to watch. But now that it does mean something, not only does it mean something as far as a real win, it means something towards the postseason now that these are conference foes. So, I think that right now, Bryant is probably everybody's favorite, not just because of what they've done since 2018, 2019, when they have not – right. Also just what they've done this year. Really, they had to knock some rust off in the Salt Bowl in the first half, not really surprising there. But that's kind of what I've been telling people really since the second half of the Salt Bowl. Bryant has been clicking on all cylinders, while the Bruins, and also got to give them their credit, Brandon Cobb has had a breakout year. I know that the offense for PA has really benefited from defenses pretty much just trying to stop the pass, which has helped Brandon use his legs a lot more. But this is by far the best defense that they are going to see thus far and possibly all season.
Yeah, we saw it with Little Rock Christian on Friday night. Little Rock Christian's got a good offense. Their philosophy, their scheme, the way they do it. And they were rolling up. Bryant was rolling up cover one. Look, they got a free safety over the top, and then they're rolled up man, 2 yards off the receivers. And they had to fight for every yard they got. When you got Elijah Hill at the defensive end spot for Bryant and that defensive line linebackers, they fly to the ball. They can put 5 men in the box and beat your running game with it. That's what's tough. So that's going to be the key. It wouldn't surprise me if they do a spy on Brandon Cobb on Friday night. That's probably what they'll do. And they know they just got to keep their head on a swivel because with PA, and you know this as well as I do, Kyle, if there's a guy that's running past you, you can guarantee there's going to be another one coming underneath or across. That's the way they run their offense. They do a good job with Coach Thrash, that offensive coordinator. He knows how to dial it up. He's been in that offense since he was a high schooler, running it as a quarterback at PA. So he knows what to do, and it's gonna. I think it'll be a competitive ball game. But I think Bryant, the defense and the physicality, even though PA is more physical than what they have been in the past, I think Bryant's just on that other level right now, but I expect a good game.
And heading on down to Class 6A, Benton shuts out Sylvan Hills 49-0. Catholic remains undefeated following a 41-13 victory over West Memphis. How about those Greenwood Bulldogs just continuing to roll right along? 63-14 over Russellville. It was 49-0 at halftime. And Kevin, Gain Archer just continues. I think he was 14 of 16. Completed just about all of his. 16 of 18. It was only 2 incompletions, 5 first-half touchdowns, and then Champ Davis and Grant Carnes each had a pair of those. Champ Davis been a big-time move-in for those Bulldogs, has he. And then also Marion, they survived. I was not shocked that this one was close, Kevin. Marion 28-21 over El Dorado. Just because you never know with the Chris Hill coach team, but also the fact that it's such a long road trip, you always have to factor that in there. And then also in the East, Jonesboro gets their first win and a huge one at that, considering they've got Catholic this week. Then they have Marion the week after, but they beat the Yellow Jackets 49-28. Asa Myers with the big game, 10 of 15 for 238 yards and 5 touchdowns. One that we had our eye on really for the past couple of weeks, Shiloh Christian over in the West. They run away from Mountain Home 37-13. Shiloh led 10-6 at the half, so it was competitive. Like we thought, Kevin, Jake Bodenstein, 25 of 37 for 285 yards, 2 scores. Griffin Mason, 22 carries, 123 yards for 2 scores, and also had a 67-yard touchdown reception. So this one was competitive as we expected, but really in the second half, from what I had understood, I haven't seen the video, but or any film or anything like that, but it does appear that Shiloh just took advantage of some Mountain Home mistakes, and that's what happens when you have a team like Shiloh. It doesn't really matter whether they've lost this guy or lost that guy. They continuously have guys step up, as we've talked before, but they also make you pay for your mistakes.
That's right. And Bodenstein is the backup quarterback. Creighton's still out, but he's just like a starter. He's played like a starter the whole season. So it's not a shocker, when you consider he came in against Little Rock Christian and did the same thing. It wasn't a shocking there. So shout out to Lake Hamilton. Lake Hamilton was down 10-0 going into halftime. You and I are talking on via text message at this point because you're covering the game, and I'm sitting here watching 37 at one time, and that was a game I really had to keep my eyes on. And Fort Smith Southside takes the opening kickoff back to the house, 17-0. I'm like, oh man, I had Lake Hamilton picked. It's at home. They're rolling. Figured Barton was going to run for 1 billion yards after Southside gave up, 234 to Chenoweth the week before to Mountain Home. So I turn it off, start watching, Fayetteville Rogers going back and forth. And next thing you know, here comes Lake Hamilton, and they came with authority. They're up 26-24. They did the freeze the kicker thing, and the Southside kicker, bless his heart, missed like a 27-yard chip shot, just dinked it wide right, and that was it. So Lake Hamilton with a huge win. That was big for 6A West, playoff seeding moving forward. So now you got Mountain Home. Yeah, they got their first defeat of the year, but it was close, man. It was close, Kyle. Like you said, man, 10-6 at halftime. They just didn't have enough, and when you make mistakes, Shiloh's going to make you pay. Jonesboro beat Sheridan, and it was not close. It was 49-14, and then Sheridan had a couple of late touchdowns. So, yeah, it made it respectable. But Catholic is the team right now, and, no matter somebody who you talk to, I know the Democrat Gazette, our friends over there, Sam Lane, Eric Taylor, they got them number 4 in Class 6A. They're undefeated at 5-0. That defense is stifling. They're playing really good. That was one of the things that you saw a couple of years ago under John Fogelman. And, Cochran was the defensive coordinator, so it doesn't surprise me that they're playing well on the defensive side. Jackson England and a new crop of receivers are figuring it out offensively. So, 41-13. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Benton has looked good, like you said. Marion El Dorado was close. Jalen Smith had a great game for Marion once again, over 200 yards total offense. I think 5 touchdowns. He had a hand in all 5 of them. But El Dorado's, pushing their way up to, that 4 or 5 spot. Should be a great couple of weeks for playoff seeding in Class 6A in both conferences.
Well, and I got to give you credit because last week you touched on that, and we've mentioned Lake Hamilton a little bit here and there, but I know that you had touched on last week about how they're really kind of entering that mix. Before last week, really, it was especially in the West. You were thinking, okay, who's going to take that next spot behind Greenwood, Shiloh? Would it be Southside? Would it be Mountain Home? And while there's still a second half of the regular season to play, Lake Hamilton wasn't really discussed in that mix. But you think about it, Tommy Gilleran's been doing this for a long time, had a lot of success at Fountain Lake, has had a lot of success. I mean, won a state championship there with the Cobras. I still remember as a junior and senior playing his teams. We beat them both of those years, and I've said this many times, but he's one of those – he coaches one of those types of teams that you remember playing them in a win or a loss. And that's where they can beat you a lot of times mentally. They were down where the Wolves 10-0 at half. Then they outscored the Mavericks 26-14 in the second half. And I don't even know if we mentioned the final score, 26-24. Yeah. Hayden Barton, averaged over 7 yards per carry, 122 yards and 2 scores. So when you've also got a quarterback in Landon West, when there is a dual threat quarterback running this system, you look back to 2020, nothing. I think his name was Grant Bearden, if I remember. Nothing against him, but he was way better with his legs than he was with his arm. Easton Hurley comes in, gives him a different dynamic. Landon West has done that too, and that's another thing about Coach Giller. And yes, he's going to run the wing tee, but he's not completely dead set on that. If he feels like they can go out of the shotgun, which you see them do, then they will do that. So I think that that's just what adds another dimension. Also, the fact that they played so many sophomores, so many young guys last year, I think that's probably another reason why we're seeing them reap those rewards.
Absolutely. And, Coach Gillen's always, he'll never call into the Friday night show on our scoreboard show, but he'll always send me the stats, like here's what we did and everything. He's always really good about giving us some talking points moving forward. So Southside, man, you got to look at them and say, okay, you come in, drop down to 6A, you're looking like you're, top 5 team, maybe that number 2, number 3 team in the 6A West. Now you're 0-2 in conference, and you got to play Shiloh Christian this week at Shiloh Christian. That's a tough way, starting out 0-3, and then you got, win your last 4 just to get back in the conversation of, possibly hosting, that, first round playoff game as a top 4 seed.
Then heading on down to Class 5A, Robinson 42-0 in a shutout over Jacksonville. Morrilton, who is very quietly 5-0, Kevin, survives Alma 30-29. Farmington 33-14 over Harrison, the 2-time defending state champion. Parkview Patriots 66-7 over DeQueen. Hot Springs Lakeside big over Magnolia 36-7. Also in the South, 68-24. Did Camden Fairview win over Arkansas High? Big game from Trent Haygood. What was that? 6 total touchdowns.
6 total touchdowns, yeah.
Yeah, 3 receiving, 3 rushing. A big night for that young man. Great player. I've been really impressed with him since his sophomore year. I'm not really sure why he's not on more radars. But Whitehall, you mentioned earlier, Daryl Patton, congratulations to him getting his first win with the Bulldogs, 26-18 over BB. A very solid BB team that's proven to be much improved this year. Also, Maumelle, you mentioned this game. They survived Pine Bluff 21-18, win in a much tighter one than expected over Greene County Tech. The Yellow Jackets win 21-14, also in the East. Nettleton over Brookland, 35-20. Maddox Hampton, congratulations to him, the 3-year starting quarterback for the Raiders. I almost forgot their mascot for a second. For the Raiders, he is now the all-time passing leader in yards and touchdowns. So big milestone there for Maddox. And then the one that everybody is talking about, and rightfully so, Valley View, 37-12 over Harding Academy. Kevin, this one, the score is indicative. It really wasn't close. You look at total offense, Valley View they outdid them 484-22. Drew Gartman, 234 yards passing on 12 of 18 attempts, 2 scores, 19 carries, 163 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Then you also had Laird Cullen and Andrew Jones that each had a touchdown and over 100 receiving yards, plus just a phenomenal defensive performance. Kevin, I'm not really going to say that I was wrong and many others were wrong. Yes, I've said many times that Harding Academy, based on what they had coming back, would run through this conference. So I admit defeat in that regard. I think more than anything, we were just wanting to see, okay, what is Valley View going to have just because they lost so much? Now, Drew Gartman has answered that along with so many other players. You can't give enough credit to what Valley View did, because not only did they win this game, they absolutely won it with authority, and they are well on their way. I think they got win this week. And if they get past the Yellow Jackets, it's a very good chance. Yeah, it's a very good chance that they're going to win this conference get the 1 seed for the first year in a row, go through it undefeated for the second year in a row.
Yeah, and I've missed a lot of games this year, and I think going into last week, I was 109-39, so I missed quite a bit, but I did not miss this one, and it was because of Andrew Gartman. It was because of, look, they hadn't had to play much into the second half. This is the first time they've really had to bear down and play somebody for a full game, and they did. And the first round of stats that I saw on Gartman had him at 236 and over 200 for the game. So either way, he had over 400 yards of offense and 5 touchdowns, two passing, 3 running. So that was the difference. And, I sent out a picture because they had one in the Democrat Gazette of him, and he had his glasses on, and, he's 6'3", he's up to 175. And you look at it and it's hard to believe this is one of the most lethal athletes in the state of Arkansas, just by looking at him. But that's what they've done. And, a lot of those same guys that have played baseball and won a couple state championships off the team last year, they're doing it on the football field too. Gartman played receiver last year, and they were wondering, okay, you get somebody like Carson Turley moves out. He had a phenomenal career as a quarterback at Valley View. Now you get Drew Gartman back there. What's it going to look like? Well, it's going to be the Drew Gartman show. They're running up and down the field on everybody, and they can move him around. They can put Maddox Tatum at quarterback. They've just got so many weapons they can use. You got Ragsdale, Cullen out there at receiver. So it's just, it's what we expected. We talked about, okay, where's Valley View in the pecking order now? Well, is it obviously Parkview up the top, then you got Robinson, then it's Lakeside and Valley View right there. Who's going to be that third team, and can, Valley View beat a Robinson? We're going to find out, so you got, 3 different conferences represented right there. And then you got to the 5A West, and you got Morrilton, who's leading everything, which came out of nowhere. Kudos to Cody McNabb, man. They put together a really good run right here. McNabb, of course, has won a state title as Morrilton's head coach. Farmington's playing better right now. Valonia got a win over Pea Ridge. The 5A South had 3 teams score 66 or more points on Friday night. Absolutely bonkers. We had 9 teams across the state score 60 or more points. So none of those games were close. Hot Springs Lakeside had a good win against Magnolia. I know Coach Rockwell said that was a really good win for his team. Our man Garrett Oldham had a really good. Grady Oldman had a really good game again. They just played really stifling defense. So 5A West, man, up for grabs right now. That's the only conference right now that I see that really kind of they still need to determine who's going to be. Is it going to be Motown, Alma, Farmington, Greenbrier, and Valonia? Seem to be the top 5 right now with Harrison, Clarksville, Pea Ridge on the outside looking in.
Well, and I don't know that Farmington has been talked about enough, just because
a lot of these. Aiden Lester is good.
Aiden Lester's he's a solid quarterback, but also too, there's a lot of people around today, especially the younger crowd. They're not familiar with Tommy Tice. They don't know that he's coached more games than anybody in state history. He was a state champion in '99. I mean, he has been around the block. He has coached some great players. He's coached some great teams. So, yeah, I think that probably the offseason was not the most fun for Farmington. Let's call it what it is. No. But also, when you bring in a guy of that caliber, the fact that he was able – Coach Tice he's a friend of mine. I talk to him every now and again, and I talked to him back in March. And when I was at his daughter was playing for Farmington softball tournament, and he was very content and just hanging out with his grandkids, watching their games, enjoying retirement. Yeah. And, he took a step into what was a tough situation, and they've overall done a great job. They played a tough non-conference schedule. So yeah, the West is, between Farmington and them and Morrilton, that's definitely probably the most unpredictable right now. So definitely plenty of fun to still unfold there. And then heading down to Class 4A, we had a good bit of discussion about this. And Kevin, right now, last week we did, and I still believe, yes, Elkins is really, it's hard not to put them as possibly the favorite just with what they've did to Warren and what they've done all season. But we'll go through the scores here, and then we'll talk about some of the top matchups, because we got especially a couple in the Region 4 and Region 8. But the results from last week, you got Southside Batesville 63-0 over Cave City, Highland 46-14 over Truman, Elkins that we just mentioned 55-6 over Berryville, Mills shut out Heber Springs 41-0. DeWitt survived Star City in a crazy one, 37-36. That is the Bulldogs' first loss of the season. But also CAC on the flip side, J.D. Plumley gets his first win as head coach of the Mustangs, 42-14 over Riverview on homecoming. Also, shout out to Reggie Swinton at Forest City getting his first victory as the Mustangs head coach over Hall, 47-45. Nashville, I know that was a program that really needed a victory. They got a big one, 49-0 over Fountain Lake. This was a week after Fountain Lake scored 72 points. And then, Kevin, on the flip side, Arkadelphia absolutely smoked Bauxite 49-7. The Badgers, I don't know that we, of course, did the game of the week there. I don't know that I've ever seen a defense live in the backfield quite like the Badgers did. Miners had 103 yards of rushing, 80. Of course, this is just a repeat
on one play.
One play, the repeat of what Chris Babb had mentioned on the postgame show. 103 yards, 86 of that was on one play when the game was out of hand. So the teams combined, Fountain Lake and Bauxite combined for 150 points last week. And so 7 days prior, they totaled 7 in week 5.
And they gave up 98 combined.
It's nuts how crazy of a game football is. Then Lone Oak, how about this? Clay Bimberg gotten back-to-back wins. So he's got 2 victories as Lone Oak's head coach, and both of them are shutouts. Jackrabbits shut out that Bald Knob 41-0. Then Clinton 24-20 over Pottsville. Ozark bounces back with a 46-21 win over Dover. Hamburg 30-6 over previously undefeated Helena, and also in the 4A8 Warren slipped by Monticello 30-21. Dardanelle 60-6 over Waldron. Big performance there by multiple guys. Mina 34-21 over Lamar. And how about Malvern? Those Leopards, they remain unbeaten with a 52-12 win over Haskell Harmony Grove. Gentry edges Lincoln 35-28. So went through quite a bit of scores there, and then we'll just preview a couple of games. As I said, Region 4, you've got Mina at Ozark. Ozark, I know they've had some injuries, been really banged up, trying to get things back on pace in the second half of the year. Dardanelle at Clinton, I know there's going to be a lot of eyes on that one. And then, of course, in the 4A8, you've got Hamburg at Warren, and you've got Star City at Monticello. Star City and Monticello kind of been they've had some surprising win in a good way, surprising moments, I think, more so than what people had expected. So big time for matchups to keep an eye on, and 2 of them in both the 4A4 and 4A8.
That's exactly right. And, the 1-4A, Elkins is at Lincoln. It might be, kind of a trap game for Elkins, who comes off the 55-6 win over Berryville. I think it was homecoming for him. So, playing Lincoln, who just lost to Gentry at home, 35-28, that may be something. Forest City plays Mills. This is going to be Mills's first test against somebody who has athletes. And I talked to Reggie Swinton Friday night, and I talked to him again last night. They've got a running back, Kevin Young. He had 15 carries, 227 yards, 3 touchdowns. Also had 2 receptions for 26 yards. He's got over 550 yards in 4 games this year. So that could give Mills trouble. It could be one of those up and down games in the 50s and 40s. We'll see. But, that's a great win for Forest City at home against the Little Rock Hall team that had won 2 straight. I talked to Coach Jim Withrow on Friday night. They're just, they were just right there. So, you don't know, man. Hall could be that 5th team out of the 2-4A. You got Lone Oak, Mills. Just depends on how that breaks out. Southside's I think they're gonna run away with the 3. The 4, like you mentioned, that's where Crazy Town comes into play. Clinton, of course, Junior Ryland Jones had another big game in that win over Pottsville. All the home teams won on Friday night. Dardanelle, of course, 60-6 over Waldron. That wasn't a surprise. That was homecoming for them. Yet Clinton, Mena, and then Ozark. Kobe Wilbanks is back. He had a huge game on Friday night. They had to come back. They were down, I believe, 21-20 against Dover. Next thing you know, it's 46-21. Ozark has win. So huge games this week in the 4, Dardanelle at Clinton, and then Mena at Ozark. I think that Mena at Ozark game could be one that's really tested. But as we mentioned last week, Mena was 4-0 for the first time since 2014. Now they're 5-0, rolling right along. Malvern's 5-0 quietly. The 52-12 win over Haskell Harmony Grove. It's going to be Malvern and Arkadelphia. Stop me if you've heard this before. In the 7. But yeah, the 8 looking really interesting right now with Warren. Really tough game against Monticello. Monticello's right there. They just been counter punch all year long. They get beat by Fordyce. Then they come back, have a good start to the conference season. Star City loses their first game of the year. Tell you what, Tommy Cody, congratulations to the DeWitt Dragons. They could have laid down after that 36-22 loss to Warren last week, knowing they had to go to Star City, who's undefeated, been playing well all year. They got a 1-point win. Kudos to the Dragons on bouncing back right there. So, man, Kyle, like we say every year, 4A, it seems to be the most fun because there's so much parity in just about every conference. There's 6 conferences, 5 schools from each conference get to go to the playoffs. 2 teams get a bye, and you just got a lot of competition this year, and that's what we need in 4A. That's what we need in these smaller town schools right outside these metropolitan areas. That these kids, it's the small town feel of high school football, no matter where you're at in the United States. So I'm really excited, in Class 4A, covering every week and talking to these coaches and finding out these uncovered gems like Kevin Young from Forest City, who hadn't been talked about a whole lot. And, going back to Trent Haygood and Camden Fairview, Nick Vaughn said on Friday night, he said, man, nobody's talking about this kid enough. I'm like, Coach, I want to tell you right now, I think he's one of the top 5 running backs in the state. He wasn't my preseason list. He's just one of those dynamic players. We're finding those guys every week. Creed Vega at Dardanelle had another great night. It's just every week these guys keep performing, and it's a lot of fun.
On down to Class 3A, starting with some scores. Prescott will do some shutouts here. There were multiple of them. Prescott 63-0 over Horatio. Salem 49-0 over Episcopal Collegiate. And then Mayflower, they remain undefeated due to the Eagles, 35-0 over Yellville Summit. Fordyce 50-0 over Drew Central. Melbourne 43-33 over Quitman. Boonville, the defending state champions, 42-6 over Hackett. Centerpoint 46-6 over Parker's Chapel. Jesseville 51-14 over Two Rivers. Harmony Grove OC, they've got a big one with Prescott this week, but they did survive Falk in a high-scoring matchup, 52-48. Bismarck survives Smackover 36-27. Glen Rose also slipped past Magnet Cove 49-42. Risen, I believe the Wildcats are still undefeated, if I'm not mistaken, after a 38-6 win over Dumas. And Kevin, how about that Barton game, the 29-20 victory, walk-off
Hail
win
Mary
over Palestine Wheatley in a Hail Mary. Who was it? Was it somebody? It was an East Coast, a Delta, Arkansas Delta on the east part of the state. Photographer got a great shot of that. It's probably all over Facebook by now, all over social media. Man, you love those types of games. I know it was really tough for Palestine Wheatley to lose in that manner. But as fans, those are the types of games that you absolutely love. Kevin, how about Mansfield? 42-39 over Charleston on the road. That was kind of the question coming into this year. Daniel Burton coming back, a dynamic player in Class 3A that doesn't get talked about enough. That's one to mention on that team. But last year they made that semifinal run that nobody expected them to do. I know Charleston's had some issues up kind of in the trenches from what I've gathered. But nonetheless, that is huge for Mansfield because there has been question. I know that I've said I think they're a good team, but I don't know that they can duplicate of last year. It might have been a one-hit wonder. So far, they're proving people wrong.
Yeah, and Andrew Stevens was the photographer that got the Barton catch. Shout out to him. Great job. You know, the photographers around the state. Jimmy Jones is, of course, one we know. Nick Wenger does a great job. But these Delta smaller places like this, Andrew Stevens, phenomenal job Friday night getting that play, you know, in a still photography. That's a great job. So, yeah, Mansfield, we talked about 42-39. That's huge right there. So now you're setting up a Booneville-Mansfield, you know, playoff showdown for a conference title in the one. Booneville's got to take on Greenland this week, which is kind of, you know, maybe tough for them. Booneville hasn't really been challenged since Poto, Oklahoma. That's it. That's all they've, you know, only challenge they've had this year. Ozark, they beat up on. They knocked Will Banks out. They went through 3 other quarterbacks in that game as well. So Booneville's rolling right along. It's funny talking to Glenn Parrish. They have just now had a running back go over the 350 mark for the year in yardage. That is a single game record by Dax Goff. So they're spreading the love, spreading the ball around. Jace Washburn's doing great at quarterback, legs, arm, doing everything. They don't have to throw the ball very much, but they've got 3 or 4 guys. They had 6 guys over 40 yards on Friday night. So that's huge for them. So, yeah, it's setting up to be a showdown between Mansfield and Booneville. Looking forward to that. In the 2, Melbourne, big win over the Q. Quitman, 42-33. Good bounce back because Salem thumped Melbourne the week before. Mayflower still undefeated. I like those guys. I like the way they're playing over there. And as you mentioned, in the 3, everything was up. And I'll tell you something about this. I'm sorry for the folks at Osceola, anybody who was listening to the scoreboard show on Friday night. We had reported the score as Osceola winning 26-14. My partner, Barry Grooms, had gotten a text message that said, no, it's been reported wrong. It was 41-26, Walnut Ridge won. Well, they did. It was 26-14. The Bell kid, the quarterback for Osceola, had a phenomenal night running the ball, throwing the ball. So Coach Robert Hooks, he knew going back to Osceola that was going to be, you know, that's his hometown. He wanted to take those guys to the next level, back to the Clinton Gore days in the late 90s of winning state titles, being at War Memorial Stadium in December. So a good step in that direction. They beat a really good Walnut Ridge team. And then, sorry to my Rivercrest fans, I said y'all only had Cavante Washington, but Newport had about 4 of Cavante Washingtons, but they don't. There's only one Cavante Washington, and he let the whole state know on Friday night that he is that guy. 48-44, huge win for the Colts. They're back in the conversation as one of the top teams in the state in Class 3A. Kyle, congratulations on calling out Glen Rose as being that team in the 4. We knew that those guys, look, starting a lot of sophomores, they were going to be slow start to the year. They beat Magnet Cove 49-42. Now they got a huge game with Jessieville this week. That's likely going to decide the conference. So kudos to those guys. Kerry Rogers, Center Point Knights, they're rolling right along, 5-0 in the year. Bismarck needed a close game. They needed to be tested, and they were tested Friday night at Smackover. Talked to Coach Cade Beckwith, an assistant coach. They started out really slow in that game, but they come back, got a win at 36-27 at Smackover. So everything's setting up in that, that 3A7, Prescott, Center Point, Bismarck. It's going to be a really good showdown in the next 4 weeks.
I want to touch base back on Rivercrest because I think when they were in 4A, I said, especially towards the back half of multiple seasons, as you get closer to playoffs, deeper into those playoff runs, they always seem to be right there. You always wonder if Cam Turner were healthy, Shiloh Christian probably still would have won in 2020, but it would have been a lot closer. Then they went last year and they were getting blown out by Harding Academy. Then they came storming back and Harding Academy survived. But they just seem to always be one of those. And Coach Fleming, I don't think he really cares. I doubt he reads the paper whatsoever, other than maybe seeing his players getting highlighted or something like that. But Coach Fleming just continues to win. Rivercrest, they seem to always be that forgotten team, regardless of what class they're in. And I think Newport doing what they did and getting those players that they did, one left came back. They added Barker, of course. So I think with what they had done, what Newport had, that kind of overtook Rivercrest just because they had been putting up so many numbers and really took attention away from the Colts. But Rivercrest, they just continue. They just play, man. They don't worry about what's being said or what's not being said. They just continue to prove people wrong, and they've been doing that for a long time.
Absolutely. And I go back because I had, Cam was my primetime performer of the year that year, I believe. If not, he was right there. Excuse me. Just what he did. And then you had, his brother come through, and they just done a great job the last few years of, they get knocked down, they get back up again. But that northeast part of the state, we've always questioned, Kyle, and this is just the way it's gone the last few years. The smaller classifications have been dominated by Central and South Arkansas, with the exception of Shiloh Christian. I know, but they're gone now. They've moved up. But those Northeast Arkansas teams, it was all these typical. I remember a couple years ago, Clinton goes 10-0, first round of the playoffs, get beat. Rivercrest has done that before. They go 10-0. Salem going 10-0, get in the first round of playoffs, get beat. Those teams, they just always run to Elkins. Made a good run last year to the semifinals, but they were one of those teams that they would get right there, and then they would get beat. So kudos to the Rivercrest Colts. I'm there with you on that train right now. They're rolling right along, and it's going to be hard to stop them moving forward.
And also, Buda Harris had another big game along. Washington was 15 of 21, 254, 2 touchdowns, and he also had 140 yards and 2 scores on the ground. Then Buda, 113 yards on just 4 receptions and a touchdown. So definitely another name to watch there. Pretty much Rivercrest, their 2026 class, stud basketball players and some stud football players. There's a lot of them. So also, got to go down to 2. I was going to get to golf, but we got to do our Class 2A. Cannot forget about those guys. Bigelow, the defending state champions, 35-12 over Hector. Bearden, 27-6 over Baptist Prep. Carlisle just continues to do what they do, 51-6 over Clarendon. Junction City slips past Mineral Springs in probably the top 3A or top 2A game last week, at least on paper, 20-14. So the Dragons now have a win streak going. Mark Tree gets past Earl, 24-20. Kevin, I wasn't shocked at this next one. East Poinsett County, they hand McCrory the Jaguars' first loss, 22-12. Of course, EPC had been well battle-tested. Brandon Powell always schedules tough in the non-conference. I felt like that was probably going to happen, that result. Yeah. Then I think Desart Mariana, now that one wasn't that game canceled? I think
it was forfeited. Yeah, it was 13.
Okay,
13-0. Yes.
Gotcha. That's what I had heard. I saw that score, and I was thinking that Mariana had some. Yeah. So, and then how about this one? Man, what better start? I talked about just the banger of a football weekend we had Thursday night. What better way to kick this off? Conway Christian, they slammed the door on Mount Ida. They won 42-41. They stopped a 2-point conversion. It was the Mount Ida quarterback, Dakota Beachy. He took the snap, went left, and he just basically hit a wall of Eagles. And so Conway Christian's been one up there along with Carlisle that is a state title favorite for Class 2A. But, Kevin, Mount Ida is kind of one of those in Class 2A that we mentioned about Rivercrest a second ago. They've won some state championships under Michael White. They're always extremely competitive, and that's one thing that he had talked about. Another thing that is consistent with the Lions is they typically are very low on depth. He said, we're not going to go the 8-man route. We're going to keep playing as long as we're going to basically play 11-man as long as we're able to play. Yeah. And again, this year they've got like 20 bodies, but they always, if they stay healthy, they've got 1 or 2 of those players that can really get stuff done, but then the rest of the guys just do their job. We saw that again against Conway Christian. They just came up short against a really good football team.
Yeah, and I thought Conway Christian would handle business. Mount Ida really showed me something. That offense is tough to prepare for. It's like going against the Harding Bison, who just continued to roll through everybody. They won 57-3 this past week. Cole Keelan had an outstanding game. Okay, back to high school real quick. I know you do a great job with the GAC coverage. It's just that 2A2 conference is turning into a slugfest because Mark Tree beat Earl 24-20. Mark Tree's, Ken Carter we've talked about. EPC, that's a good win for them. Puts them in a really good playoff position. Des Arc, of course, got the win. So now you got Des Arc hosting Mark Tree this week. That's a huge game for conference playoff positioning right there. And we're looking, Conway Christian end of the year being where they need to be. So huge win for Bigelow. Obviously, Junction City, they scored really late in the game to take the lead. It was 14-14 back and forth all night. That puts them in a great position to win that 2A3 conference. Bearden, good win over Baptist Prep. Baptist Prep's realizing really quick that the non-conference schedule, the early games that they had, it's going to get a little bit tougher. Last week, Carlisle thumped them 51-7, 51-6, something like that. And then Bearden took care of business 27-6. So Hazen, good win for the Hornets, 2-0 now in conference play. They beat England 24-14, and Poen had to come from behind win. So, like you said, it's Carlisle and then really everybody else right now. But those next two through five teams right there with Junction, Conway Christian, it's looking really good right now. I'm liking to see the other teams starting to rise a little bit in Class 2A.
And we'll wrap up episode 33 by going through some state golf championships. The girls were last week, and then the boys will be this week. So we'll go through here. Class 6, of course, we always start at the top. That's always something I've done. The Mount St. Mary Bells, they won state championship along with Conway's. I'm gonna mess this up. Yinyo Yang is, I believe, how you pronounce her name.
Good one.
She was yes, great. Yeah, ended up being the medalist. Class 5A was where the storyline was, Kevin. So Russellville wins state. Susanna Mann scored a 61. A
course
61.
record.
Yes, I was thinking that was a record. The only records that I saw in the AAA record, but I meant to hit up someone about this before we recorded, but the only thing that I had seen was the streaks of how many state titles. That was pretty much the only thing that was in the record books were the teams that had won consecutive. But wow, man, big shout out to her. That's massive. I don't know that we'll see that. I mean, that's very impressive.
Yeah, we've had some really good golfers come through this state.
Yes.
Believe it or not, I played back when I was in high school. I doubled it during my junior and senior year at Mills. Go and qualify for state, go out and play baseball the next day. So it's tough. I've always loved golf, and it really, caught my eye because I've always followed it. Since they moved it to a fall sport, it's been a little bit different. It's been kind of hard to cover with everything else going along with volleyball, football. But you and I talked about this week that, this young lady needed the recognition. They go over to Paragould Country Club. She shoots a 61. Now, with the AAA record book, I don't know if it's the same as track. So in track, to have a state record qualifying time, you have to do it at a state meet or meet of champions. So that's what you have to qualify. You can't go out, and I think golf is the same way. So it has to be at the state level or what their overall, which is their meet of champions, so to speak. So they have an overall. So shooting a 61 is 10 under, 11 under out there. That is unheard of. Now, I talked to coach out at Russellville, and I was like, hey, is anybody talking to this girl? She's a high academic, really good grades. You got some schools on the East Coast talking to her. Clemson has talked to her. I think Arkansas was a little late to the fight for her. So she, Miss Mann, is going to be playing some golf for a long time at a high level. That was really good to see at Paragould Country Club. It just shocked me to no end. I saw 61. I was like, that's unbelievable. This has to have some attention. So kudos, congratulations to the Lady Cyclones.
Yeah, when I used to play golf years ago, before my back turned into that of a 75-year-old, I had some decent rounds, but man, I never came close to that. Yeah. So also in 4A, how about those Brooklyn Lady Bearcats? I think this is their third consecutive. So between volleyball and golf, golly, man, they've been dominant. So congratulations to the Lady Bearcats for winning another one. Dakota Redmond, Brooklyn was the medalist in that one. 3A Bismarck, the Lady Lions won that one, and Lady Lion golfer Addie Morrison was the medalist for that. Parker's Chapel, I know that they've won. Parker's Chapel's won some golf and tennis. They've got some.
Yeah, they are a golf dynasty down there.
Yes, yeah, they definitely fall sports, especially golf, and also I think tennis has been one that they've won consecutive ones as well. So the Lady Trojans win another one. Taryn Sink from Tuckerman was the medalist, and last but not least, Class 1A, you had Westside Greer's Ferry. Lauren Fancher from Kingston was the medalist. So, Kevin, I want to go ahead and just say this now. Westside girls athletics are I think it would not shock me if they win a basketball. I'm not predicting anything, but it wouldn't shock me if they win a basketball state championship. They got a lot coming back. Plus, they added Addie Overturf, who was on this golf team. Probably the best. I mean, I would say the best athlete at Shirley, and she's now finishing out her prep career there. Great basketball player, exceptional softball player. She can pitch, she can play short, she can play center, got a good stick. So look out for Westside Lady Eagles athletics this year. I don't think it wouldn't shock me if they win more state titles on top of this. So
yeah, and you see that so Class A doesn't play football. We know that. But the spring sports and softball and baseball, those small town schools, you saw Westside Greer's Ferry get to the baseball state championship last year. Reese Hip is back again this year. Those kids play every sport. They play every sport that they can because small towns, small communities, they'll have 12 in their graduating class. That's all they do is they play sports and, hang out with each other. So it doesn't surprise me. Town like Taylor, of course, has been softball, baseball, royalty the past 7-8 years in softball, past 3 years in baseball. So doesn't surprise me that you see a lot of these young ladies and young men in Class 1A. They get to have outstanding careers in 3 sports if they want to, whether it be tennis, golf, volleyball, basketball, and then baseball or softball. Exciting stuff.
I'm looking forward to, gosh, I did it again. Man, almost through an entire episode. But no, I'm looking forward to it because, Taylor, the girl, of course, the boys are going for their 4th consecutive and baseball, and then the softball will be going for their 8th. They've already got a record 7th. Now, this one's going to be interesting for softball because they lost a 4-year kid. Now, they do have their 4-year ace, but they lost their 4-year catcher, 4-year shortstop. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. Of course, we've got all kinds of spring sports coverage coming at you once again. But for now, of course, going to get through football, and we'll have basketball as well. But that will do it for episode 33. Again, make sure if you have not subscribed to YouTube and also hit that notification bell so that way you're notified when we release an episode. Be sure and do that. Plus, you can subscribe on all the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. But other than that, that will do it. We will catch you next week. For Kevin Bohannon and all of us here at Natural State Sports, my name's Kyle Sutherland. We'll catch you next time.